Dear colleagues, customers, and partners, welcome to the seventh webinar in our series covering Amasty's products, services, and processes. This is the first time that we have shared our webinar invitation with all our customers subscribed to the Amasty newsletter. And we are so excited to see so many new people join us live. My name is Yulia. I'm a business development manager at Amasty. And today I am joined by my colleague, Anna Sharlai, a customer care specialist, who is at the forefront of customer assistance with many of the extensions that you have probably already had a chance to use. When we choose topics for our webinars, we always take a look at the current trends that are changing the face of the Magento market. And today's webinar is not an exception because we are going to talk about the California Consumer Privacy Act, also known as CCPA, that went into effect just 3 months ago. And we will be talking about the new rights that this regulation introduced for Californian consumers. We will also talk about the CCPA extension by Amasty, the new extension that was released just 2 weeks ago. And we will talk about how this extension helps organizations and companies to provide these consumer rights. And we will put all this into context by first talking about the GDPR and cookie consent extensions by Amasty, just to talk about different kinds of solutions that we have for providing data privacy and protection. And as always, at the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session. So please feel free to submit your questions using the Ask a Question section at the bottom of your screen during our presentation or afterwards, because we will have a few minutes to collect your questions. Before we talk about the three extensions that will be the focus of our attention today, let's talk about the two regulations, the European Union and Californian regulations that actually inspired our products. Just to give some context to those of us who are probably not yet familiar with the GDPR and CCPA. And before we do that, please note that we are not a law firm, so we cannot provide legal advice or consultation. So if you need legal advice, please consult with a lawyer. All right, so we will talk about the regulations in their chronological order. And let's begin with the GDPR extension. Well, the GDPR regulation, which is General Data Protection Regulation. We as many of us know, this regulation was adopted by the European Union back in the year 2016, and it went into effect on the 25th of May, 2018. So the GDPR has been in force for almost 2 years now. The GDPR provides a comprehensive legal framework for the protection of personal information. And here, by personal information, we mean any kind of information that can be used to identify a person. So it can be a name, an address, IP address, a phone number, and so on. And although the GDPR, this regulation, it applies to the European Union countries. It applies to all the companies that serve customers in the European Union. So if your company makes its website available for access by EU citizens, then it means that GDPR also applies to you. And because of this, it is important for a lot of companies around the world to comply with the GDPR. And compared to the GDPR, the CCPA is a new regulation that was enacted in 2018 and came into effect just 3 months ago on the 1st of January 2020. Similarly to the GDPR, this regulation is aimed at providing more control to consumers over how their personal information is handled by businesses and organizations. And in the case of the CCPA, especially by large corporations. So here it's important to say that this regulation, the CCPA, it applies to all companies that serve Californian residents. And well, not all the companies, but only those that satisfy at least one of the following three criteria. So the first one is make $25 million or more in annual gross revenues. Second criteria is the companies that collect, sell, or purchase personal information from 50,000 or more households, individuals, or devices. And the third criteria is the companies that derive 50% or more of their annual revenues from selling customers' personal information. And although the GDPR and CCPA have many things in common, these are two different regulations. And for example, the GDPR is considered to be the stricter one, at least get a clear and active consent from data subjects before they collect any information. And they need to provide opt-in options for their customers. Meanwhile, the CCPA just allows the customers to opt out of the sale of their personal information. That's why you probably heard that the GDPR is called an opt-in regulation, and the CCPI is known to be an opt-out regulation. And obviously, it's very important to comply with these regulations because violating them can lead to substantial fines. For instance, Facebook and British Airways learned it the hard way when they faced fines of 51,000 euros and 200 million euros for GDPR violations. And even though the second fine, the 200 million euros fine that British Airways is facing, it's not a final penalty, it's just a proposed one. It gives us a good idea of the huge amounts that these penalties can reach. And to prevent such fines, by the way, the GDPR fines, according to the regulation, can be up to 20 million euros or up to 4% of a company's global turnover of the preceding fiscal year, whichever is higher. And to prevent these fines, it's important to comply with a number of data protection and data privacy regulations and requirements. And I'd like to highlight the difference between these two things, because data protection here means that the companies and organizations are required to keep personal data safe from unauthorized access. And data privacy means that organizations are required to empower the users to make informed decisions about who processes their data and how the data is processed. And why this difference is important, it's because our extension, the GDPR extension by Amasty, it leaves the data protection part to the businesses and focuses on the data privacy part and on providing the consumer rights that are outlined by the GDPR. For example, let's take a look at some of the rights that the GDPR provides. And specifically, we'll talk about transparency and communication, the right of access, right to erasure, and the right to data portability. So Anna, let's talk about these rights, and can you please tell a bit more about what they mean and how our extension helps companies to provide these rights? So for example, what does transparency and communication mean?
Sure. So basically, transparency means that company needs to provide a data subject with a clear and accessible information about how the data collected, processed, and used. And this can be achieved by providing users with a clear privacy policy at the time you collect their data. And please remember the opt-in requirement that we discussed earlier. So now I would like you to show how our GDPR extension covers the following right of transparency and communication with the help of our extension then. So, first of all, our GDPR extension helps to create, edit, and delete privacy policy from one place in the admin panel. For that purpose, we have privacy policy grid. Then you can get active consent from any forms and pages of your website. Moreover, our GDPR extension allows you to add multiple checkboxes on any forms and pages of your website. For example, I will show you custom registration form. So here, as you can see, we have 3 consent checkboxes. And pay attention, they are not pre-ticked. The customer should click on them for providing his or her consent. And the last one, our GDPR extension will help you to display privacy policy in the pop-up window. For example, when the customer click on privacy policy, the pop-up with the full privacy policy description will be displayed for them. And the customer can provide their consent directly from the following pop-up by clicking I have read and accept. And after that, you see the following checkbox is ticked.
Okay, awesome. So it's pretty clear about the transparency and communication. What about the right of access? What does it mean?
So the following right means that the customer user has the right to be provided with the full personal information, personal data that the website keeps and collects. And our GDPR extension allows users to download their personal data in the CSV format from their customer account. So here, our GDPR extension creates privacy settings page in the customer account, and the customer can download their personal data from download personal data section. And before downloading the file, the system will ask to enter customer's password, and it's another which also contributes to data protection as well. And in addition, I would like to mention that we released a big update for our GDPR extension earlier this March. And now the manager of the website can also download personal data in the CSV format from the admin panel. For example, when the customer submits a request for store to pass their personal data to third parties. And I will show you the website. The admin of the website can download personal data just by clicking download personal data button. And as you see, the file is downloaded in the CSV format.
Okay, great. And as far as I know, this is also related to the right of data portability. So what does this mean?
Yeah, it's correct. So the right of portability means that the customer that the user's personal data should be downloadable in the format that can be easily shared and understood. So as I've earlier mentioned, our GDPR extension allows customers or website managers to download personal data in the CSV format. And I will show you example of this file. So as you see, it's quite a small table with 2 columns, quite easy to understand.
Yeah, pretty clear and understandable. Okay, and we also have the right to erasure. What does this mean?
The following right means that the customer has the right to submit a request for store to delete their personal account with all personal information or personal data that the web store has about them. So the customer can submit deletion request from their customer account. We have a special section, delete account section, and again, before submitting this request, the customer will be asked to enter his password to verify their identity.
Okay, well,
Yeah, and one more. After submitting this request, the website manager can approve or deny deletion request from delete requests grid.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. So this.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for showing us all this. I think we can now proceed to the cookies consent extension.
Sure.
And before we talk about that in more detail, I'd like to highlight that this functionality is now available both as part of the GDPR extension and also as a separate solution. And we decided to have a separate cookie consent extension back in February 2019 when we saw a peak in the demand after the Google case. So as you may know, Google was handed a fine of 50 million euros for failing to comply with the consent requirements. And the reason is that their approach to obtaining consent from customers for processing their data for ad personalization purposes was not informed, was not specific, and was not unambiguous. And at the same time, the GDPR states, quote, that consent of the data subject means any freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous indication of the data subject's wishes by which he or she, by a statement or by a clear affirmative action, signifies agreement to the processing of personal data relating to him or her, end quote. So Anna, if we look at these consent characteristics, how does our extension help organizations and companies to ensure that the customer consents meet these requirements?
Sure. So first of all, consent must be specific. So which means that the customer should give consent on each activities related to the personal data. And to get a specific consent about each activity related to the related to any data collection. So our cookie consent extension and GDPR as well. So let customers to choose which cookie categories they allow to process. For example, essential cookies, marketing cookies, Google Analytics cookies, or custom theme one. Show you our extension demo. Yeah. So awesome. When the customer visits your website for the first time, the advanced bar with cookie settings will be displayed for them. And the customer can click on switches to provide his consent, or even close it if he or she doesn't want to provide any consent. And the second point, that the consent must be informed, which means that the request of consent and the explanation of data processing and its usage should be described in the plain language. And our cookie consent extension allows to create and edit cookie categories description from one place in the admin panel. We have a separate cookie groups grid. So here you can see you can add description and to all your them. And edit them. Yeah. And the next consent is that the consent should be unambiguous. So there should be no questions whether the customer has consented. So silence, pre-ticked boxes, or inactivity do not demonstrate consent. And our cookie consent extension uses special advanced bar with switches, as I previously showed you. I'll repeat. So when we restart the page, so you see, these switches aren't pre-ticked. The customer should tick on them to provide his consent.
Okay, great. And also the customers should be able to withdraw their consent, and this
Yeah.
should be an easy thing to do, right?
Yeah, right. So the customer can revoke his consent, and for that purpose, our cookie consent extension creates a special CMS page, cookie settings page on the front end page, and the customer can change his cookie settings from the following page. So this is this page. And moreover, our cookie consent extension adds the link to the following page to the footer of your website, as you see here.
Okay, great. So we have talked about the GDPR extension, the cookie consent extension. Now let's move on to the third one, the CCPA extension, and let's briefly talk about CCPA compliance and see what kind of penalties violations it can lead to. As you can imagine, this is a really new regulation that has been in force for just 3 months. So no penalties have been handed so far to any companies, as far as I know. But just to give you an idea of the amounts that these penalties can reach, the CCPA allows for penalties of up to $2,500 per record or up to $7,500 per record for an intentional violation. And as you can imagine, this can be a big deal for large corporations that hold thousands and millions of data records. And according to the CCPA, corporations and businesses must comply or provide their consumers, their customers, with a set of rights. And these include the following 3 rights that we are going to focus on. So the first right is the right to know what kind of data is collected and sold and shared by the organizations and companies about them. The second right is the right to request the companies to delete their personal information. And the third right is the right to opt out of the sale of their personal information. So, Anna, could you please just say a few words about these rights and how our extension helps to provide them?
Sure. So our CCPA extension really let customers to know which information the store has about them and keeps. So the customer can download his personal information in the CSV format from his customer account, as I've previously showed you in GDPR extension, but I will. So again, the customer can download his personal data from a download personal data section, and the system will require to verify the customer's identity by entering his or her password, which is another requirement under the CCPA. Then from the following privacy settings page, the customer can submit a request to delete his customer account with personal data and opt out of sale of personal data from don't sell my personal information section. And again, in these 2 sections, the system will ask to enter password before submitting these 2 requests.
All right.
Yeah, and one more thing, I would like to show how our CCPA extension makes the lives of website managers easier. For example, the website manager can use our convenient consent log page for tracking customers' consents. And it's possible to set up delete request notification for website managers and to enable the automatic deletion of abandoned customers' accounts. And the last one feature can be configured from the module config. I will show you. Here it is. So when we enable the following feature, the extension will scan customer accounts and their data, and if the last order of the customer was made earlier than the specified number of days here, the extension will create a deletion request, and you will be able to find this request on deletion requests page. Please pay attention that our extension doesn't delete anything automatically. The website manager should check all delete requests from the delete requests page and deny or approve them.
Okay, yeah, that's important so as not to lose any
Yeah.
information. Okay, so I think that's it for the main presentation part, right?
Mhm.
Now, the last thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is that the CCPA extension was the first extension to be made available for Amasty customers for pre-ordering and so customers were able to purchase it at half price even before the extension was released. And pre-ordering is essentially a new purchasing options for our customers. And when you pre-order an extension, you just pay for it in advance. And as soon as the extension is released, you get the package automatically, and you will get an email notification, just not to miss this point. And once you pay for the pre-ordered extension, you will get it in your account no later than 3 months after the payment. And if you'd like to learn a bit more about the pre-ordering options, you can just take a look at our product page for quick orders extension. And this is the extension that is currently available for pre-ordering, and you will find more information both about the extension and about what pre-ordering system means if you go to the product page on our website. All right, I think now that's it for the presentation part. Now let's move on to the Q&A session. And if you haven't done it already, please use the Ask a Question section at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. We will now take just a couple of minutes to look through your questions, and we will be back to answer as many of them as possible. All right, so we are back. And first of all, we'd like to thank you for all the great questions that we have already had a chance to look through. And well, we'll take them in the order that we have. I have it here on my laptop, so I will need to turn a little bit here. So, Anna, we
Mhm.
have the first question about cookies. And
Mhm.
the question is, can I show cookies for European countries only? Can you please answer that?
Sure. So thank you. It's quite a great question. So, but unfortunately, our GDPR and cookie consent extensions do not provide ability to show cookies for specific countries only. So the cookies will be shown for all your customers from all countries. But our product team is currently working on the feature that will allow you to show specific cookies for specific customers or specific countries.
Yeah, this is really great to
Yeah.
hear because this means that we get really great feedback from our customers
Yeah.
and requests. And I'm happy to hear that we and our team, they do their best to satisfy these needs,
Yeah.
right? All right. Second question that we have here. Uh, and I'm going to take this one, Anna,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah. No
So
problem.
GDPR is basically only for companies that deal or sell outside the USA. Essentially, since the GDPR as a regulation, it requires companies to protect the rights of EU citizens. This regulation and the extension covers EU countries and well, EU citizens. So if your store serves customers or people in the European Union, serves EU citizens, or makes, again, I will just highlight it, makes its website available for access by EU citizens, then you will need to comply with GDPR, and our extension will help you do that.
Mhm.
Okay, our next question is, um, can I have different pop-ups for each consent box?
Thank you for your question. So, I'm not on. So I'm afraid that you can have pop-up only for privacy policy at the moment. For other consent checkboxes, the CMA's page will be created. For example, I can show you on our extension demo. So when we click on, for example, I accept terms and condition consent checkbox. So we will be redirected to the separate page with the full description.
Okay.
But again, our team will uh, try to improve our extension, and we are planning to release the feature that will provide website managers to add pop-ups to all consent checkboxes, not only to privacy policy one.
Okay, great. So another great thing to hear
Yeah.
that we are going to include this feature in the future.
Yeah.
So we have some more questions, and the next one is if the GDPR extension can delete customer accounts, how do I keep the order information for tax reports?
So it's quite a very vital question for website for the website owners, the
Right.
owners of the web stores is better to say.
Businesses, right?
Yeah, for businesses, because when the customer submits a request to delete his customer account, our extension allows owners of stores to have the vital order information and for some period of time. And we have a special configuration in our um, module config, so prevent data deletion for recent orders. And our extension will keep order related information for some period of days. So after the customer submit his request and you delete his customer account, for example, as is shown on our extension demo, for 180 days, you will still have their information in all orders that were connected to this customer.
Okay, awesome. So we solve this need, right? Help the businesses to keep this information just when it's really necessary. Okay, and let's see. We have one more question, and it is related to Google Analytics. So, how does the consent plugin work with Google Analytics? Could you please tell us?
Yeah, sure. So, extension allows Google Analytic cookies to be set, but they will not be processed until the customer's consent. So, without customer's consent, they will not proceed. They will be stopped.
Okay. Well, we hope this answers your question, and overall, the information that we have provided has been helpful and really answered your questions. And before we call it a day, well, we wrap up this presentation with an important announcement, just in case our emails and our social media announcements haven't reached you. We just wanted to tell you about our new initiative that we launched a couple of days ago in the light of the COVID-19 crisis. And we really want to contribute to this great cause of assisting people to deal with this crisis. So we decided to offer our assistance and to offer our extensions free of charge to the companies that distribute medical supplies. And we are also willing to assist in any way possible to any kinds of companies that provide essential goods or just try to make the lives of the people right now during this pandemic easier. So if you have any needs, immediate needs that we can help you to satisfy, in order to help people around the world, please let us know and send us an email at partners@amasty.com, or you can just email me or any of my colleagues, and we will make sure that this information and your request will get into the right hands. So let us know if we can help. And thank you so much for your time, for being with us, and please stay healthy and safe.